Mr. West, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Welcome to Out of the Blank podcast. Would you like to introduce yourself to everyone out there listening?
Thank you, Robbie. It's nice to be with you. I'm Darrell West, Senior Fellow in the Center for Technology Innovation at the Brookings Institution, which is a DC-based research organization.
Now, where's your particular focus?
I focus mainly on digital technology. So I did a book on AI a couple years ago and thought a lot about kind of the interface of AI and humanity. What are the optimistic and pessimistic scenarios that we face in the future? And then what are the policy guardrails we need to put in place in order to safeguard our own future?
Now, are you an optimist or are you a pessimist in the direction that we go with technology?
When I give talks, I often joke with audiences that I can do optimism or pessimism. And I ask them what they want. And, audiences almost always choose pessimism. And I thought about that and I realized, well, if they're optimistic about the future, they don't need experts. They don't need me telling them how to think about these issues. So audiences are definitely worried. I am kind of a mixed bag kind of person in the sense that I can see the benefits. And certainly in my own life, I've lived through the digital revolution. I've gained the benefits of that. Makes writing books and lecturing and doing a variety of other things much easier. But of course, there are lots of problems that we've seen emerge over the last few years as well.
Now, when it comes to some of the benefits, can you list off some of the benefits? Maybe we could talk about those, and then we'll get into some maybe downsides of technology as well too. I'm a bit of a Luddite. I know that's weird for probably my generation. I post and ghost on social media. I saw that to be a really bad kind of thing when you're refreshing your follower count over and over again. Now, I know you can use it in a healthy way, but I feel like sometimes if you get caught in the wrong algorithm, sometimes you can kind of go down a little bit of a dark area where you end up getting stuck in like echo chambers and things. So I've tried my best to only use technology for this. Um, and it's not easy. I do play phone games though, and like for a very long time for no points at all. But they're fun, and I guess they pass the time because next thing I know, it'll be from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. There certainly are challenges, but on the benefits side, the chief benefit is just the pure convenience that digital technology brings to our lives. Like, I remember the old days of rotary telephones that were attached to a desk. And basically, we did not have the mobile phones that we have today. So certainly all of us can appreciate the benefits there. There are potential benefits for the workforce in the sense that technology, robots, and other types of things can do the boring, dirty, or dangerous tasks. So, for example, when a nuclear reactor goes up, sending a human in to measure the radiation level is really dangerous for that human. So today they send in robots equipped with cameras and sensors. They can measure the radiation level, get a picture of what's going on, and therefore relieve the human of having to do that. So you can kind of multiply that ad infinitum across the whole economy. There are lots of ways in which people's lives have been improved and likely will continue to be improved through digital technology.
Now, is technology better for maybe military jobs, like trying to find positions for them in the public sphere? I just feel like that brings on a lot of controversy when it comes to people that might not necessarily want a robot taking over their job. It always ends up leading into that, at least from my perspective, from what I've heard from people. It's always talk about, well, maybe you don't have to work, which is it's a really good point. Maybe you're kind of like brainwashed to think that you like work. I understand that. I feel like I need my job. I just need to get out of the house sometimes. But also, if you didn't have to work, could that mean you can go to other things? But when it comes to like military stuff, I could see so much advancement when it comes. I mean, we're entering like cyber warfare, basically. It's the whole thing's going to be taken over with technology in a sense, which is good because then you don't have to lose soldiers and things. But then does that lead into endless fighting with machines when we get robots and things of that sort? So I don't know. Like I said, I got a lot in my head. I have ADHD. So at any point, just cut me off on one thing and you can go right into it.
Well, the military angle actually is an interesting angle, and we're already seeing a lot of this play out in Ukraine. Certainly, drones have transformed the battlefield. I've seen images of the Ukraine soldiers sending the drones up just so they can scout out the opposition, where the Russian forces are, where the tanks are, where trenches are being dug. So, that's a tremendous advantage for any set of troops. You mentioned cyber war. The next big war is likely to be a combination of both traditional warfare and digital warfare. For example, countries can take down the financial infrastructure of their adversaries. They could disable the ATMs where people are getting their cash. We've seen in Ukraine there have been attacks on power plants, so you can disrupt the electric system and the digital infrastructure surrounding power. So all those things are certainly going to be very worrisome. And we need to be training our troops both to think about traditional warfare, but also the new digital varieties that are already starting to pop up.
Now, I mean, is this eventually, we come into human capacity, and I mean, I know humans make machines, but I feel like machines are just going to excel past us in a sense as well, too. Like the technology, even with bots, that's a really big issue that I see enter my sphere, enter a lot of people's spheres, because whether it's a, I don't know if you follow the whole Russian troll farm thing, if you think it's a propaganda. I mean, propaganda has been throughout history, but now it's like it's so extremely complicated where it's like you can't tell if a person's real or not. Half the time I'm talking to someone and I think I'm having a good conversation with somebody in like Hoboken or something, and they're like, "Nah, I'm just a bot." They'll say like the same thing over and over again, and I'll be like, "Okay, wait a minute, this is not a real person, but I just had a full-on conversation, so I am lonely." And then I have to move on and then forget like it ever happened.
Yeah, absolutely. No, there certainly are lots of examples of that kind of behavior taking place. And I mean, essentially, what is happening now is we have democratized propaganda and disinformation. So you're right, propaganda is not new. Certainly in World War I and World War II, we saw very effective use of that in authoritarian regimes around the world. They excel in propaganda directed at their own people, oftentimes, and sometimes at us as well. So we do have to worry about that. But digital technology is making the spread, both the creation and the spread of disinformation much cheaper and easier. Like you actually don't need a troll farm anymore because you can automate the dissemination of the disinformation. And so in our own 2024 presidential election, we are likely to see a lot more disinformation and fake news being spread compared even to 2020.
Now, is that like political like messaging from certain campaigns and stuff like that, or is that what type? How are we going to see more in 2024?
Well, the technology is much more powerful. I mean, with generative AI, you can basically create videos that look completely authentic but are fake. You can create audio tapes that sound completely authentic, but the person never said them. So I can imagine situations where either Biden or Trump, or probably both sides, will end up manufacturing tapes to make the opposition candidate look bad, even though the person didn't say or do what was alleged. Or another way in which information is being spread is, both Biden and Trump have gaffes. Biden sometimes looks confused on the stage. Trump sometimes gets caught up in his own words and says stupid things. What people are doing is kind of pulling a clip out of context and making it look like the person is not fit for the office of the presidency, and then using bots to really disseminate that all around the world. So we will see a lot of that in 2024.
Just because you have to preface this in these types of conversations whenever you talk about Trump or Biden, that I'm not on either side. I would believe more deep state just because it keeps me out of the mess of the right and left, and I just believe in a capitalistic type thing. But I watched a video of Biden on Twitter. It's fake, but it was a guy had photoshopped ice cream in his hand, and you could only tell by the pinky. You could only tell by the pinky. It was just off. It looked like it was broken and going off to a different direction. Like it was just not, you could tell something was added to it. But you're watching like these are really realistic. Like no matter everyone's commenting, retweeting us up this, and I got it sent a couple times to me, and I was looking, I was like, it's fake. You got to look at it, and you really got to examine these stuff now. But most people don't have the time to do that on social media. So I'm like, we're entering a really dangerous territory. In my opinion, not so much worried about the guideline policies for the military. I'm more worried about the human stuff right now, the civilization, society, social media type stuff right now. Mostly because that's something I'm seeing right now where I can go, this is something you need to fix. This is something you need to fix. This is something you need to fix. But I mean, I don't know. What's your thoughts? I mean, like even Twitter, Elon Musk. I mean, everyone gives that guy a lot of crap, but I'm seeing him take blue check marks away from people, which is just interesting to me to watch it all go down.
Yeah, no, certainly there's been a major transformation of Twitter. And you're right. If people want clues on fake videos, they actually should pay attention to hands, because that actually is one of the hardest things to automate and make hands look authentic. Like there are videos out there where the person has three fingers or four fingers, or as you point out, the pinky kind of going off in some crazy direction. So if people look carefully at the video, you can start to see some clues, but even those types of things are getting much better. And in the very near future, they're going to reach the point where even experts could not look at a video and distinguish whether it is real or fake.
Now, does that come in like with someone's rights as an individual to be able to find whoever that is and sue that person? Like there was a deep fake porn of Gal Gadot, the Wonder Woman lady. And she was freaking out because someone had put her face on someone else's body and people were paying a lot of money for it. And it was like, I mean, what do you have rights as a human at that point? I mean, you're not doing the act anymore, or you're not doing the act at all. And now someone's using your image and trying to get money off those sales.
Well, in situations like that, there actually is legal recourse. Like you can sue somebody for defamation or invasion of personal privacy. So our current legal code actually, if you can prove harm to you, if you can prove somebody has profited off of your image in a very fake or nasty sorts of way, you can actually sue those individuals. But the problem is, it's not just one or two people engaging in this kind of behavior anymore. You're talking about large numbers of people who have access to this kind of technology. So she may not just have to worry about the one person who did it. There may be 1,000 other people who could do exactly the same thing.
Do you think that a lot of this, like, there's a lot of services online that you can pay for, like YouTube, Twitter stuff, or they boost up your analytics on things? I see it on Twitter. People buy followers that are just retweeting stuff, and I don't know if it gets more impressions, but that number of impressions goes up. Do I know how much are real? No, I do not. Do you think that's because of the fact that there's like a lot of services that where people can promote their stuff, but you have to pay that exclusive site to be able to do so? Like I look at that like not just something that just randomly occurred and someone's like, I want to buy me 1 million followers. I think it came up because someone created a company to do it cheaper than the actual platform, which allows them to promote your stuff for you if you pay them like $6 a day or something like that.
Well, technology creates all sorts of perverse material incentives. Like in a world where basically people make money off the number of clicks, that obviously encourages people to do things that are click worthy. And oftentimes it's the most outrageous things that generates the largest number of clicks. So we do have to worry about that. There are people who are making money off of disinformation, who can basically get paid to spread false information, even if they know that it is false. Obviously, in the case of the Dominion Fox TV case, we saw a very dramatic example of a major television network broadcasting information that the people knew was fake, but they felt like they had to do it to keep their audience. And
Wait, what was it?
the Dominion sued Fox TV basically over defamation uh, in in regard to how Fox covered the aftermath of the 2020 election. And Fox ended up settling that case for almost $800 million because there are all sorts of emails and text messages that showed that Fox knowingly distributed false information that harmed Dominion, which is a computer company.
I was that was a serious question for me because I don't watch Fox or I don't watch CNN. I don't watch any news. I'm that out of it when it comes to the left and right type stuff. But everyone knows that news is just kind of propaganda in a sense as well too. I mean, everyone's pitching their own narrative and stuff. You just kind of slide to the one that fits your narrative.
Well, that's one of the dangers of the current time period. So when I was young and growing up, there were basically three networks, and they all presented more or less kind of the same version of reality. And of course, that is no longer the case. In a world of narrowcasting and even microcasting, people can choose the perspective that they want. But then the problem from a societal standpoint is that really messes up civic discourse in the sense that when people have their own reality, their own facts, when your version might be completely different from my version, it makes it difficult for our leaders to address problems, to compromise, because compromise now is a dirty word. It's kind of a sign of a lack of political principle. And so technology is having ramifications for the way that our country operates and creating lots of problems.
If you had to choose, where would you put policy or at least guidelines or at least some, like those little barriers you got in bowling on to make you not go into the gutter? Would you look for the ones on the social media platform, the one that comes in contact with the general public, or would you look for the ones that come into the military? Because both have things that I feel like should be addressed as well too, the military for sure. But I'm a little bit more worried about the general public on things. I mean, we're already really divided right now as a country. And I know everyone says that and it's like the next going to be the next civil war. I don't think that, but I think there's a really bad point where nobody's talking anymore. And it's very, very difficult because you just look at labels and things like that. And then like I get it all the time from having any political party on my show. I don't care about your politics. I just care about you as a person. But people are like, you had this right winger on. I'm like, I don't know. How do you guys see that? You guys got a metal detector or are able to find that, but people just sense it out somehow. And I'm like, if we can't get past the whole divisiveness and tweets and all these types of things, we're never going to be able to have the conversation. It's not compromising. It's just being able to talk to another human being.
I do worry about the domestic ramifications, which are very different from what we're seeing in national defense and military spheres. Just the way the technology can divide people, the way it can spread disinformation, but also, we want our technology to be fair and equitable as well. And what we're seeing with a number of new technologies is the data on which they are trained either are unrepresentative or incomplete. And so then the algorithms end up making biased decisions because the decision is perfectly rational based on the information that it had. But if the information is biased, then the ultimate decision is going to be biased. So we just need to figure out how to deal with issues like that. In the physical world, basically, we created all sorts of rules that, banks have to be fair in their lending decisions. They can't discriminate against one group or another. We need to figure out what kind of rules we need for the digital world because the same types of inequities and biases are popping up there. But if the bias is done by an algorithm, how do you sue an algorithm?
I mean, is there what would be a potential recourse that you could have to deal with an algorithm that has the problem? I mean, trying to take away somebody's bias, I don't think that's possible, to be 100% honest with you. Even I'm sure I have biases that I can't think of right now, but I probably have one out there about something.
You can certainly sue people if you can prove that there was a known harm to you. But let's say in a traditional bank, like if a lending officer kind of denies you a mortgage that you feel you actually are entitled to, if you can prove discrimination, then you can sue that individual. But if banks are now making lending decisions, as they are, based on algorithms, how do you prove that an algorithm discriminated? There might be a difference in how different groups are treated, but that doesn't prove intent. And algorithms don't necessarily have an intent. And so therefore, it's actually been hard to apply the rules we already have to the digital world when algorithms are making the decisions.
Do you think that there's going to be a team of people at least that would create rules or guidelines for some of these emerging technologies that are coming out? I've talked to a lot of academics about emerging technologies and kind of like some precautions. I'm always big on oversight. I just want to make sure we're thinking about everything before we go a step forward. But there's going to be always something that you can't think of, and that leads into a possibility. I mean, right now we're dealing with something like I think it's like digital currency, where they want to do all digital currency, which I'm like, look, they did that with Bitcoin in the beginning. That's everyone was so happy about Bitcoin. I was like, eventually it was just going to take there. I don't use cash anymore. I don't know a whole lot of people that do. But now that you're kind of taking away the cash thing, is that going to cause more people to go back to cash? Where I go, look, this is what we talk about. That's worrying about something that's going to happen. What are we going to see with emerging technologies? I mean, my TV can talk to me. My TV has a camera in it. There's a Alexa probably in every single room in some houses. So you kind of get to a point of like, when this stuff evolves, what are we not thinking of? I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm just paranoid or something, but I tend to think about, something, at least try and think 5 steps ahead on this type of stuff. I don't think a lot of people are worried about where technology is going. I think they're just ready for the next thing.
There are state and national agencies that are looking into these very questions, but what they're doing now is when there is a harm that takes place and people file complaints against a certain company, they investigate, and if they find evidence of wrongdoing, like they can fine that company. But the problem is these companies are making billions of dollars. So, if you find a large tech platform $5 million, like that is nothing. Like that doesn't even dent the profit that they are making. And plus, these enforcement actions are geared at harms that take place kind of one at a time. What we really need are some policies that basically specify, we need technology to operate in a fair and equitable manner. It needs to be transparent, like we need to understand how algorithms are making their decisions. And that's where the oversight needs to take place, kind of figuring out what are the rules of the road that need to get implemented just in order to protect basic human values.
What can society do to, I guess, also be aware of these types, like better education when it comes to not just terms and conditions that nobody reads, but just being able to have a class on being understanding maybe some of the technology that they're using? I feel like if they're explained to it and taught, like, this is what cybersecurity is, this is what this cyber hacking is, this is what, once you start explaining the methods of things where you're putting your sensitive information on it, I've never put my bank card on my phone. I've never done it. I've never done it on anything, and I make sure I don't do that. If I have to do a transaction, I take it off immediately. And even some sites, they need a form of transaction stuff on there. I'm like, your sensitive information is all on there. I mean, around when like tax return season happens, when you got to bring out your taxes and everything and pay for those, that's a small bit of sensitive information that is being exchanged either through a text, through a phone call, through a meeting, through whatever. Then it goes online in someone's hands and their phone, whatever. Then someone can get into your phone, and next thing you know, you got your social security number out there, and that's necessarily not a good thing for you.
I mean, what we need is people need to improve their digital literacy. Like, we're used to schools focusing on reading and arithmetic and kind of basic logic. In a digital world, things are different. The benefits are different and the risks are different. And you point out, the possible loss of confidential information, your bank card information or a social security number. Like, people need to be aware there are data brokers out there that are buying and selling consumer information. Like, you may go to one tech company and let's say they just collect 10 or 20 bits of information on you. But if they have your phone number, they can actually match those data points to 20 other data points that a second company has, and another 20 that a third company has. And before you know it, they can aggregate that information, and there may be hundreds or thousands of bits of information on you, all integrated in one data set. So people need to be aware of, what kind of information is out there about them right now. You worry about being paranoid. You're actually not being paranoid. This stuff actually is happening. And of course, that doesn't even get into, foreign entities that are hacking our system and trying to get your confidential information so that they can either use your credit card or abuse you in some other way. So people need digital literacy classes that basically instruct them on how the digital world operates, what are the benefits, what are the risks, and then how you can protect yourself in this crazy world in which we live.
Is there any way to adapt some of the tech platforms as well too? I had a friend of mine, John Callis, who was on here who talked about an encrypted email server that he was trying to do for a little while as well. I forgot what foundation he works for. He works for some like Electronic Freedom Foundation or something. But he was talking about encrypting emails, and I'm like, well, I don't really need to encrypt my email. I'm not doing anything crazy. And he's like, yeah, but what are you sending through your email? And then I kind of started realizing, yeah, I do car payments sometimes through the email. I do a bunch of things through my email, and I start realizing, where does that link to next? But that's the issue, is that we're entering the digital age, and it's good. I like it. But at the same time, there's a lot of things that are now becoming only the digital age, where like it's more convenient for someone like a tax person. If they don't want to have a building and pay all that rent for the space, they just want to do it out of their home or something like that. Yeah, you can go to a different tax person, but also, is it easier just to send it through your email? Is it easier to send some of that stuff through a text? Yes, it is. That's the thing about thinking a step ahead. I mean, when it comes to email encryption, when it comes to all the platforms that we use, should some of these tech policies or tech companies just be, maybe have updated rules on how much sensitive information they carry? Even using for Zoom, sometimes you have to have your phone number on your account. I think I do have mine on there as well too. So that's just a requirement. That's just in the basic profile. It won't let you get to the next thing. And that's on, like, maybe not just Zoom, but there's other platforms that do that. So then what do you do? Facebook used to be like that. You could search people up by their phone number. That was crazy.
Yeah, people need to realize they are leaving digital fingerprints throughout their electronic
I
world.
know.
Just because, if they have your phone number or your email address, they can actually track you much more effectively than if they had your social security number. People don't realize their mobile phone number is unique to them and can be used to integrate databases and can then be used to keep track of what you do. And you mentioned the idea that you don't do anything illegal, so therefore you don't really care if somebody gets access to your email. What people don't realize is there are lots of things that are completely legal, but would actually be embarrassing if they were known. Like think of the Google searches that you do and the crazy keywords that you may introduce, or maybe there's some strange medical illness that you're worried about, and so you're Googling for information about that. Like there's stuff that would be embarrassing to you, even if you are engaged in perfectly legal activities. And so that's what people should worry about. What we really need is a national privacy law, which basically specifies exactly what the consumer rights are, that we have protections, that companies that violate those common rules can be subject to lawsuits and can be held accountable for their action. Like right now, we don't have a national privacy law. And so it's really almost a wild west out there. And if they have your phone number, they can get a lot of information on you.
What's limiting the privacy law? Like, has anybody ever brought it up to the floor to be voted on yet, or is it just something that a lot of people aren't super worried about?
It's caught up just in all the political divisions that exist in Washington, D.C. There are several states that actually have adopted pretty tough privacy laws, like California did this a few years ago. Virginia has done that. So there are states that are moving in that direction. The European Union has a very tough privacy laws as well, kind of governing what kind of information companies collect and how long they can keep that information. So eventually we will get to the point where we will have laws like that. But right now, all of the rules are really tilted in favor of companies over consumers. And there are data brokers that are buying and selling your information.
Do you think that'll ever switch when we're not so focused, or they're not so focused on companies and they're actually focused on more of the consumer?
They should be focusing on consumer protection. I mean, I was a little amused a few weeks ago when there was all the controversy over TikTok, and is TikTok transmitting your confidential information to the Chinese government? What people don't realize is American tech companies collect so much information, and then data brokers buy and sell that information. The Chinese government, like if they want confidential information on you, they can buy it in the open marketplace. Like there are no limitations on the ability of data brokers to sell your information either domestically within the United States or internationally. So, all the worry about TikTok seemed to me to mask the larger issue of there's a ton of data out there, and there are actually very few rules on the dissemination of your personal information.
I'm curious what they're pulling out of TikTok. Like, I know they're trying to do the TikTok ban. Everybody's freaking out about it. I warned about TikTok from the beginning. I actually just recently used the platform just to see what the whole hype was about. I get it. It's addicting because you get a really good exposure to, like, you always get a follow every time you post something. You always get a bunch of likes every time you post something. So that's that instant gratification or feedback that people really appreciate and really enjoy. I think that's why social media is so interesting. You get a bunch of likes on your photo or something like that. But I don't know what information they're getting out of it too, and the double standard aspect, like, you're not worried about your own government that's taking your own information and doing that type of thing? People are like, "No, I'm just worried about China." I'm like, "Honestly, I'd be worried more about China because they do scare me, but I'm worried about our government as well too, because there's a lot of things, not just our government, but also what tech companies can get as well too." I mean, we do put a lot of sensitive stuff on there, but I mean, TikTok, what would you say? Have you looked into that, what they're able to pull out of there?
I mean, we should worry about all these entities, foreign entities, the US government, and also corporate entities, because they all can get access to information and then use it for whatever purposes they want. Uh, with TikTok, from my standpoint, there's not a lot of confidential information there, certainly compared to other platforms. I mean, certainly they are aware of what videos you're watching and how long you're watching them. And like if you're watching risque videos, they would be aware of that. But that's relatively benign information compared to like the wealth of information that Facebook has on you or CVS has on you, because CVS has not just your consumer purchases, but your prescriptions and health related things that you may have. Bank of America has a ton of information on your credit card purchases, your mobile payment purchases, how you're keeping your money, how you're spending your money. And so I would actually worry a lot more about all those things because those data are much more comprehensive uh, and to my mind, should be protected much more seriously than they are right now.
Do you think that, like, I mean, do you worry about the government stuff? I know I mentioned that before. I'm not anti-government. I've noticed a lot of things wrong on both sides where I've been like, no, I don't know. Like, read the church committee report is usually what I recommend to people from like a past historical thing. But I kind of just point out, like, I don't know what our government uses either. I mean, like, I had a buddy that he has a site called Dreamland Resort, which is just taking pictures of Area 51 and not doing anything bad, just photos. He's not a conspiracy guy. And the FBI raided his house, and he ended up being on all these news networks because they thought he was like a communist spy, and they never even paid for the $30,000 worth of damages and to like his laptop and all these types of things. So I just go like, I mean, he didn't know that could happen to him. I didn't even know that was going to happen to him. But you start talking about it's like, what can the government do, and what are you exchanging through that could be seen as like terroristic information? I mean, we labeled communism back in the day like everything. So I'm just worried like if I say something in a podcast or if I type something through an email that they'll see it and they're like, we gotta I mean, honestly, that's the dream, right? Just getting like the government after you. No, I'm kidding. I don't want to be a Edward Snowden, whatever his name is.
Now, there certainly is a lot to worry about in that regard, and as government becomes more politicized, people actually should worry more about this. Like, whether you're from the left or the right or some other perspective, there's the risk that there's a government agency that may take umbrage at something you have said or done and really go after you in a very nefarious sort of way. So people should be aware of that. We have very broad rules in a lot of areas. There can be selective enforcement of the rules against you, even if other people are doing exactly the same thing, but the government isn't interested in them. So we do need basic civil liberties and civil rights. That's kind of the basis of American democracy. And as our government becomes more divided and politicized, the risk of some agency getting out of control and doing something bad to you that is not warranted actually goes up.
I've talked to people who have been not political, but very balanced in the realm of technology, and they actually care about where that's going to help society grow more as like a species, not necessarily in a political party or political working class affiliation, any of that type of stuff. They've kind of just focused on like, I like this technology, I like looking at algorithms, I like this type of stuff, and I want to see this grow and see how far we can go as a society. I feel like they should be put in charge of making some of the policy decisions on some of these AIs. I feel like if we give that to the government, I don't, I mean, what, 4 years it goes one way, then the next 4 years goes another because a different person gets in. Like that back and forth regulation, I feel like you're going to do more damage than good. And then censorship as well, too. I mean, censoring one side, maybe not censoring another, picking and choosing, that type of thing. You just have to have people that are just there for the product and what the thing is and want to see that expand rather than trying to put their own, like I said, bias. But how do you eliminate bias?
Well, you really can't, but you can oversee it and enforce really egregious abuses that come out of that area. Uh, I mean, I do think people need to worry about who is making the decisions now, because over the last few decades, ever since the internet developed and as these new technologies have developed, we basically have had a pretty libertarian stance where we delegate almost all the decisions to the tech companies and the engineers, the coders, and the software designers. But we should keep in mind they're not like the rest of us. Like, technical people have a very certain way of looking at the world, which may or may not reflect the way you look at it or the way that I would look at it. So I do think we need a broader range of people. Like, I don't want just technical people making the major decisions, because they are a distinctive breed in and of themselves. So I think what we're starting to see is a lot of countries are moving away from a libertarian stance and starting to develop more guardrails, thinking about more oversight and more regulation. We do need to make sure that whatever regulation emerge is fair-minded and not biased towards one side or another. But I do think we need to kind of apply the same standards to the technology area that we apply in every other area. Like, if you're running a bank, there's a lot of oversight. If you're a retail outlet, there's oversight. There's actually not very much oversight of the technology area. And we actually can see some of the problems that emerge from that.
Now, when it comes to what age we're in with tech right now, would you consider this like a peak period, or do you think that like we're kind of like in the I would say the bit of the storm a little bit where we're still trying to figure things out and we're getting there. I mean, do you think this is something that we'll be able to get over with like the next 10 years? We'll be able to find at least a lot more improvements that we can do to the original system rather than focusing on more advancing technology? Because sooner or later, we're going to hit autonomous vehicles like stage five, like they want, where you're never going to have to drive. That scares me because I had someone on the show talk about it and he's like, you'll never have to drive again. I was like, I like to drive. He's like, maybe a separate track will have you on. I'm like, yeah, but I like to drive my car. He's like, you don't need to do that. And I was like, I get that. And I'm sure it'll be normalized down the road. I'm 100% positive of that. But that is a big thing for someone like myself who might not be so into technology and other people out there that also get worried about what they're going to have to be able to do, what their rights they're going to have. People like to drive, you know?
Yes, definitely. And we need to think about that. But people should be aware that over the next 5 to 10 years, the pace of technology innovation is going to accelerate dramatically.
Oh, God.
I mean, just think about all the new stuff that we're seeing right now. You know, the advances in algorithms, generative AI and chat GBT, quantum computing is on the horizon. The thing people should realize is it's not just one digital revolution that we're going to be going through in the next few years. It's like 10, 15, or 20 different ones. And when you add them all together, the world, even 5 years from now, is likely to look very different than it did than it does right now. There are going to be new advances in technology, new applications of them. You know, companies are really speeding up the automation cycle just because a lot of them are finding having problems finding the workers that they need, so they're already automating the routine tasks. That's going to accelerate as well. So we need to be prepared for this new era that's going to be on us before we even realize it. A lot of people think since we've had the internet for 30 years, we've seen a lot of the innovation that we're going to see, but we're actually just in the infancy. And as things unfold in the next few years, I think people are going to be shocked how much new technology is out there and how it affects them.
Do you think it's kind of like opening up Pandora's box in a sense? Like AI art, AI. This is AI art on my shirt right here. It's supposed to be me with sunglasses on. But it's AI. It's fantastic. I could never do anything like this with my hands. But there's AI art. There's AI music. I listen to it, and I mean, if you sit and play around with AI music for a little while, it'll start creating something pretty interesting. I mean, in a good way. I mean, AI art is a little bit off, but this is like Pandora's box. I mean, eventually, if this is just the infancy stages of things, where's this going to go in 10 years, 20 years? And I know people say, I'll still prefer regular art. I'm like, look, there's some stuff out there that looks really, really good now compared to, I think, about a year ago when I was having people on talk about AI art. Before it was always a little off. Now it's like I see a perfect picture of a bee or something like that, whether it took it off of images on the internet or whatever it did, but it puts that in front of you. And then, I mean, that opens up the market to what about copyright at that point? Are you still getting your copyright thing? I know they have little terms and agreements on stuff, but this is kind of like when you see it, you can't just go back to the way it was before. This is kind of now the world we're entering into.
Absolutely. And that's going to take place in every sector of human existence. I mean, you're talking about it in the art area and in the music area. The same thing is happening in finance, transportation, retail, education, healthcare, and the military. If you add all that together, AI is going to be the transformative technology of our time. And generative AI is like a new thing on top of traditional AI. You're going to be able to basically have very easy user interfaces where either you tell the AI what to do and it does it in a pretty effective way, or you may write a short prompt and you'll get either a text back, a video back, a picture back, or a software system back. The generative AI, we've already seen advances in that just in the last couple of months. So the world is going to change substantially. And what we need to do is really think about the societal ramifications. Like, I like to say that we're kind of at a similar point as we were 100 years ago when America was moving from an agrarian to an industrial economy. And it was just a huge transformation in the nature of work. And, it affected people in a lot of different ways. But if you think about it, 100 years ago, we updated our public policies to help people cope with industrialization. We developed Social Security, workers' compensation. We pushed for mass education. We invested in highways and other infrastructure. And after a couple of decades, and it was a rocky a couple of decades, America came out in great shape. And after World War II, we were one of the world's leading superpower. We're kind of at the point now where we're moving from an industrial to a digital world. We need to update our public policies and our social contract with one another to help people with this transition. And if we provide help, a decade from now, our country will be in great shape. If we don't provide that help, there's going to be a lot of people left behind, and America is going to be in a much tougher and more difficult space.
Now, is there a large focus amongst, I guess, the people that are being able to move whatever powers it be to be able to make these things happen with the same perspective that you have on this? Where you seem like you're focused into like you're aware that this is what we need to do for the next 10 years. I mean, are other people thinking about that as well too? Because I know we rely a lot on tech companies and other people to do this stuff. But I go, yeah, but money is a big motivator, like for a lot of things. And I don't see them really looking over the money that they're making compared to what's going to be in 10 years, when right now is when they can be like, when can we make more?
There are certainly people thinking about all these issues and how technology is going to affect the economy, our political system, and society as a whole. And we just need to do more of that. We need to be having national conversations now about what we want our world to look like. Uh, uh, what happens to the people who are going to lose their jobs as a result of automation? Like, how do we, keep a permanent underclass from developing? When you look at other countries, like if you have, say, young people with 20 or 25% unemployment, like those tend to be violent places. You think of places in the Middle East or places in Latin America. When there's a large group of people who do not have jobs, it's not a pretty picture. There's a lot of crime. There's a lot of violence. It's often a society that's in turmoil. So we're in the very early stages of that. Obviously, none of us want that to be our future scenario, but we need to be thinking about how do we handle the issues that we can already see to make sure we don't end up in that kind of situation.
Have you ever looked into digital twins?
Meaning what?
Like a digital copy of like a place or something like that. There's an island, I guess it's close to, I wouldn't say Singapore. Somewhere in there around that region. My geography is terrible. That's my one weakness. Um, can't find any others. No, I'm kidding. But did
You're lucky.
digital twins, there was a guy who made a statement about it that said that this island's going to be gone within the next 4 years. The water level has just kept rising to the point where this whole place, this whole culture is going to be gone. So what they did was they took pictures all around the island and they tried as much as they possibly can to store all this information into a digital kind of twin. And that so that you enter VR, you can go in and explore the place because it's not going to be there forever, which I think is interesting if there's a situation that we can't stop that from being gone forever. But I also don't want that to be normalized to the point where everyone can just give up on everything and start being like, well, we just make a digital twin out of it, which I know is going to happen 100%.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that particular thing, but certainly, with climate change, there are going to be islands that exist today that 20 or 30 or 40 years from now are not going to be there. And so, just the question of what do we do about that? What do we do about the people who are living there? I mean, there may be whole island nations that disappear, and what does that mean? So, we just need to get out front of all these conversations and just start thinking about, you know, what are the changes that are going to take place? I did a book a few years ago entitled Mega Change, in which I argued that we live in an era of large scale transformation. We have technology transformation. We have changes in the nature of our population. Our political system is going through a lot of changes. The economy is moving towards a digital world. It's like all these changes mean there's going to be large scale change that affects people. And we can already see that makes people nervous. Like people can see these tidal waves coming. And if we take action early, it's actually easy to protect ourselves. But if you wait until the wave is upon you, it's like you're screwed. Like you really can't do anything at that point. So we need to take the preventive steps that you can do early in a problem like that and not wait until the last minute.
How do you get someone to act with preventative steps to make sure that doesn't lead to something like that? We're fourth quarter people. I feel like everybody's I used to say the Baltimore Ravens were fourth quarter people. Just wait till that fourth quarter comes in and they'll be scoring some touchdowns. But I look at people, I was like, unless we're at the red line, nobody's gonna care. It sucks, but that's kind of how what I've really started to notice. Now I'm a bit of pessimistic when it comes to the what my faith in people a little bit, but I choose that because I know people can act better, and I'm hopefully a little bit optimistic on the aspect that me saying that I'm pessimistic will cause them to do something. But there is a real thing when it comes to being aware of technologies, when it becomes to being aware of any problem. But as soon as you start mentioning time periods like 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, there becomes this argument of future people where people go, someone will figure that out. It's like, you can't bet the farm on that. That's a really dumb thing to do, but people like it because they don't have to worry about it. It's like whenever I have like a paper due or something, whatever, I will say that's a future Robbie problem. I do it too. I'm not going to be a hypocrite, but it's that type of thinking that's kind of been a whole part of society now. When it's just there's so many things we can do instantly now, whether it's send a text, whether it's all this, that's something when you mention 10 years from now or something a week from now is going to happen. You're like, all right, well, when it gets here, we'll deal with it then.
There is a very logical human tendency to put things off, to think, we can take care of that in the future, to wait until the fourth quarter, and then the team's really going to come through and get the victory. But what people have to realize is on a lot of these issues, the longer we wait, the more expensive the solution is going to be. It's cheaper and more efficient and more effective if we actually address some of these problems now. Like if you address them as they start to pop up, the solution actually may be easy and relatively inexpensive. But the longer you wait, the bigger the problem becomes, and then the bigger the solutions required, and the more expensive that solution is going to be.
Now, just speaking from a content creator perspective, when they opened up like the door for YouTube and all these things to be platforms where now they kind of turn it into careers. I mean, do you think that's dangerous at all too? Despite like, I mean, the limitations and the policies and things that might come on down the road when it comes to someone making a career as well too. I don't make a career off this, but I'm saying for other people, like there's issues. I've seen people's channels get taken down before. It sucks, especially when a lot of people put their hard work into something or they do something like that, whether it's a policy violation, but that's even an issue with YouTube. They don't really tell you what you did wrong. They kind of leave it as an open door policy. It's kind of like asking the question national security. I know what the word means, but I don't know what anybody's defining it as. So it's kind of like that type of issue where I go, this is now the keys to success. The internet is. People go on TikTok and you can make money off of that. You can make money off Facebook. I didn't even know you can make money off Twitter until recently. But there's these types of things now that are becoming gateways for people to start careers and jobs. And I'm like, that's something where you could be a doctor and be like, I'm set or something like that. But with this, I'm like, you're going to need a plan B and C. And two of those better not be in the social media platform. One better be a real job or like owning a laundromat or something.
Well, this is the digital transformation that is taking place. Like there are old jobs that are going to disappear, but as you point out, there are going to be new jobs that pop up. And being a digital content creator is one of them. People do need to understand they are at the mercy of the platform, and the TikTok influencers already are discovering that. Like if we end up with a national ban on TikTok in the United States, it's like their business model goes completely to hell. Platforms can make decisions to deactivate accounts, and people don't always understand why that happens. So it's kind of like any other business. You have to be aware of the opportunities and the risks. And in the traditional world, we develop insurance products to help mitigate risk. Like that's what home insurance is about, car insurance, medical insurance. It's like we know that there's some low probability that you're going to have an accident or you're going to get sick or there's going to be a fire. So we have insurance to basically safeguard our future. In the digital world, we need to start thinking about insurance as a way to safeguard against particular risk. I mean, already there are going to be new kinds of insurance policies that come around based on cybersecurity threats, data breaches that may take place. You can already buy policies for those types of risks. But as you mentioned, there may be other types of risks that could be really devastating for an individual. And there probably is going to be insurance that people can buy to guard against that.
Has your perspective on tech, I mean, throughout the years and just focusing into it, I mean, from the beginning to where you're at now, has it I mean, has it changed a whole lot more? Like, how were you a pessimist in the beginning or optimist in the beginning? And then where you're at now, obviously you're a little bit, I would say probably like me. I feel like you're not 100% out with the tech, but you're also like, hey, guys, come on. I got to pay attention a little bit.
I would say, like 20 years ago, when I was studying technology, I was more optimistic because then there were lots of people saying, oh, technology is going to be great. It's going to democratize the world. It's going to destroy power hierarchies and give people a lot more freedom. And so the vision was actually a pretty optimistic vision. But over the last 20 years, kind of bit by bit, we have now seen, oh, yeah, there are lots of good things that come from these technologies, but we can also see the bad things. Many of these technologies are what we call dual use technologies, where the very same technology can be used for good or ill purposes. Like facial recognition can be a way to find an Alzheimer's patient that is kind of wandered off and nobody knows where that person is. But if the person is kind of walking down a street and there's a camera and there's a facial recognition system, it's like you can find that person right away. But then facial recognition also can be used by authoritarian countries to engage in mass surveillance, which is terrible. So the very same technology can have a variety of different consequences, which makes it very difficult to regulate. But I'd say over time, I've definitely become more cognizant of the problems and the risks and the challenges that we face and our need just to think creatively about new ways to deal with these problems, and also just to understand that the problems of a digital world are different from the problems of a physical or traditional world. It's just because the digital world is different, the kind of problems that are popping up are different. Like even the way that we think about bias and equity in a digital space is probably going to have to be different than we do with traditional banking institutions. So we just need to broaden our horizon and recognize there are lots of opportunities, but we have to get a handle on these problems as well.
Do you think that they ever would have made the internet free if they knew how big it was going to be?
Probably not. The guy who developed it is amazing that he basically made it a free product and did not immediately try and monetize it the way a lot of other people would do. Like that was actually a tremendous gift to humanity. But it also had consequences in the sense because he didn't monetize it, he actually made it possible for everybody else to do the same thing. And so people are monetizing the internet for criminal activities, for bad behavior, for human trafficking, for all sorts of things. Because we basically had a libertarian stance and just allowed the internet to develop for 20 years without much public oversight or regulation, we've kind of put ourselves in a situation where there are all these problems. And now we're struggling from a public policy standpoint to catch up and figure out, okay, how do we deal with robocalls? How do we deal with very specific things that either annoy or abuse us in some way?
The robocall thing, they made a couple apps that could spam it and catch it, and I think a phone's even updated to put spam on there as well too. But I got the same one that kept calling me probably like 4 times a day, 5 times a day for at least a couple of months to the point I had to do a conference call with a friend of mine, and I go, "Just listen to this." And then this thing would be like, "Hello," and it was it's a robot thing, but then it would be like it would say a bunch of options, and then I would say something stupid, and it would just hang up or something like that. But then I called it one time and my buddy was on the phone, and this is funny to me. It might be funny to you, but it goes like, "Is your credit score above 360 or 480 or something like that?" And I go, "No, it's not." They go, "Well, do you have any like priors or anything like that could stop you from getting a home?" I was like, "I represented OJ during his trial." And then the thing just hung up the phone. And I was just like, "What does that count?" So I say something like that, but these robocalls, it was insanely bad how it was. Where I had to go to Verizon, I had to tell them, "I don't know what is going on. If you have to change my number or anything like that," and Verizon's like, "If you change your number, they'll still robocalls will still come through." I'm like, "What is that?" Like it's something in your chip, it's in your data, it's whatever. Something happened, and I think it was around the time they had like a Verizon leak or something like that happen. There was a big issue where they had sensitive information that got spread out. And I see those from time to time. And if you look up some of those issues with Verizon, AT&T, and all these other companies, that they'll have like a data breach type thing where I know the iPhone is probably the one that everyone wants to get into because most users use an iPhone, but then there's Android. And I know it's like, I've heard that from, I don't know if you know who Robert Epstein is. But he was on Joe Rogan talking about like even the Google car scandal. I don't know if you've ever heard about that. When Google car, when it originally came out, was driving around neighborhoods, it was sucking up Wi-Fi, and they realized it just took a bunch of people's data. And they fined Google $50,000, but you're like, $50,000 for Google is nothing. It's like, yeah, well, they didn't know. Nobody knew. There was no policy or rulemaking for that ever to happen. So that was the first time ever. So $50,000 seemed like a lot at the time, I guess. But to me, it's just the data part, whether it's, I mean, I don't even honestly wouldn't even pay for phone service. They're 2 months now. I think last 2 months I went without it. I just had it this month. It's just because
Hey, in the digital world, it's all about the data. Like it's the data that's valuable to companies, and it's the data that allows companies to basically monetize the internet. So that's one thing we definitely need to pay more attention to.
and through all your books, I mean, I know you talked about the Trump era stuff as well too. Did it get worse with Trump? Like, did the issue with security and issue with technology get worse during that stuff? I feel like there's a big political divide when it comes to just the Trump administration, and I would say a little bit of the Biden administration, but mostly off the Trump administration.
I don't think Trump had anything to do with the tech issues that we've been talking about, because these are like big structural things that are taking place independently of government. And so, the way in which technology gets used by companies, the privacy risks that we face, the security risks that we face, it's really not a Republican or Democratic issue. It's just taking place because tech companies have the power to develop new products with very little public oversight, and they're going to keep pushing the innovation window as long as they can.
But during the Trump administration, did we have a focus about the TikTok ban and actually talking about it in that sense? We knew they were taking data at some points, but we never really fully acknowledged or had any types of measures in place. I think even India banned it. It was India that banned it, but the Trump administration, I don't know if anything happened in it.
Trump did try and ban TikTok. TikTok went to court, and the courts ruled in favor of TikTok. So people should realize that if Congress passes a ban on TikTok, the next thing that's going to happen is TikTok will sue, and the government will have to prove the kind of harms that it has been alleging in the press.
Man, wait, so the Chinese government could sue Congress?
It would not be the Chinese government suing. It would be TikTok itself, because they're the company that are suffering the harm. But where the government will have to come up with some information is their rationale for banning TikTok is national security grounds, disinformation grounds, and TikTok supposedly leaking information to Chinese authorities. You can't just make those claims like in a lawsuit, like you have to prove that those things have happened. So TikTok will basically say it didn't happen, and you can't prove that it happened. And so that will be their legal defense. That essentially there were accusations made, but the evidence in support of them was very weak.
I can see them prove a couple things, but I don't know about how if we can prove if they're sending data to any Chinese officials. I saw a JFK video that was about the driver shooting JFK, and I almost lost my mind because that's the big disinformation right there. But that's the only thing I see on TikTok. My algorithm on there is a little bit hectic, but it's fun. I like it. But Mr. West, I appreciate the time you gave me to talk on my show, man. Is there a place where people can find your links?
Yes, we have a blog at the Brookings Institution, so they can go to brookings.eu. We also have a podcast where we discuss contemporary tech issues. It's called TechTank, so people can listen in on our discussions there.
Do you have any social media platforms for any of those?
Yeah, Brookings is very active on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Do you ever criticize them for being active on social media platforms?
No.
Okay.
Because they're promoting our work. So,
well, Mr. West, I'm going to link all your links in the description. Like I said, it's been a pleasure chatting with you, and thanks everybody for listening to this episode of the Blink Podcast.